Mexico City, September 13, 1847. As Chapultepec Castle casts a formidable shadow in the early morning light, the fields below its towering stone walls erupt in an onslaught of attacking United States Army infantrymen, as well as a small contingent of United States Marines. Inside the stone walls and lining the parapets of the medieval-looking structure are 750 Mexican soldiers composed of local natives, itinerant farmers, and adolescent cadets from the nation's military school headquartered here at the castle. They are Mexico's last line of defense in the ongoing Mexican-American War, the final barrier to the American forces taking of Mexico City. As the men inside the castle attempt to aim and fire upon their attackers, many are rebuffed by the incessant thunderous striking of U.S. artillery fire into the castle walls. The American barrage has not stopped since it began the day prior, and every shot seems to further disrupt the nervous systems of the defenders atop the walls. As a thick miasma of gun smoke envelops them, the shrieks and groans of the wounded mix with the shouts of orders from the commanding officers, creating a horrifying cacophony of gore and chaos. In the fields beneath the castles, the American forces have been tasked with what many among them consider to be an impossible mission of weathering the Mexican defenders' fire and scaling the steep castle walls. However, under the staunch direction of their officers, they storm forward, knowing that every second spent in the open could be their last, as bullets and artillery rain down upon them. For their part, the Marines have already carved out a formidable reputation as an invaluable American military asset. It had been November 10, 1775, when, in the Tun Tavern in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress had authorized the creation of 2 battalions of Marines. The concept of Marines, soldiers trained to fight at sea and on land, was derived from the British tradition. Many of America's first Marines had served in His Majesty's Royal Marines, learning the unique challenges of fighting aboard wooden ships and conducting amphibious operations. These early iterations of Marines were essentially maritime raiders, whose task was to serve aboard American ships, board enemy vessels, and conduct small unit landing operations. In March 1776, the Continental Marines conducted their first amphibious landing, raiding British naval installations in the Bahamas. Samuel Nicholas, the Corps' first commandant, seized gunpowder and weapons desperately needed by Washington's army. Throughout the Revolutionary War, Marines served aboard American warships, fighting as sharpshooters from the rigging and leading boarding parties. During the long and ruthless war, they developed a reputation for accuracy with their muskets and fierce hand-to-hand combat skills. After independence, the Marines were briefly disbanded, but threats to American shipping from Barbary pirates led to its reestablishment in 1798 under President John Adams. This new Marine Corps would face its first major test in the Mediterranean. Their involvement in what would come to be known as the Barbary Wars solidified the Marine Corps culture. In the Corps' first major land operation, Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon led an expedition across 600 miles of desert to attack the Libyan city of Tripoli in 1805. During the War of 1812, Marines again proved their worth in ship-to-ship combat. Aboard the USS Constitution and other American frigates, they served as sharpshooters, picking off enemy officers and helmsmen at crucial moments. Between wars, the Marines developed a unique dual role. They provided security at America's naval yards and also served as a ceremonial unit in Washington. The Marine Band, known as the President's Own, became a symbol of national dignity at official functions. By 1846, on the eve of the Mexican-American War, the Marine Corps was a small but highly professional force. They numbered only about 1,000 men, but their combination of naval and land warfare skills made them uniquely valuable for the coming campaign. When war broke out with Mexico, Marines were among the first units deployed. Now, their unique skill set will be tested to its utmost in the fight for Chapultepec Castle. Along with their rifles and sidearms, the Marines carry climbing ropes and shoulder-long climbing ladders with which to scale the walls of the castle. The castle itself, its very shape and structure harkening back to the days of the 11th century Crusades, is a national landmark of great pride for the Mexican people. The beleaguered Mexican forces fighting on behalf of General Santa Anna's army have endured weeks of critical defeats at the hands of the encroaching U.S. military forces, and have resorted to melting down the giant bells that had once adorned the castle parapets for use in making bullets and cannonballs. The veterans among them are mostly members of the Battalion de San Blas, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Felipe Xicotencal. In the preceding days, these men have spent the majority of their time in hard labor, attempting to fortify the walls of the castle with sandbags and add to its defenses by digging ditches around its perimeter. Now, after nearly 24 hours of artillery bombardment, much of their efforts have been withered away under the effects of cannon fire. With every diminution of their defenses, many among the Mexican forces feel their morale begin to waver, as the looming possibility of being overrun by the Americans seems to be a more and more likely scenario. Still, the youngest among them remain undaunted. To the great admiration of their elders and superiors, the roughly 50 cadets from the National Military Academy now fight with unbridled tenacity, unleashing volley after volley into the attacking American forces. Despite their age and rudimentary training, their resolve carries the air of a Spartan-esque determination to fight until the very end in defense of their homeland. On September 11th, 2 days prior to this battle, Colonel Nicholas Bravo had ordered that all of the military academy's cadets evacuate the castle, as he had assumed the oncoming American attack would indeed be a brutal affair. In preparation for the assault, the American forces have been split into 2 factions of 250 men each. The first group is commanded by U.S. Army Captain Silas Casey and General John Quitman. Just after 8 a.m., they reach the road that leads to the entrance of the castle. As rifle fire, cannonballs, and grape shot pepper the ground around them and decimate their ranks, the Marines finally reach the base of the castle walls. Here, as fire continues to fall down upon them from the defenders directly above, they rush into position with their scaling ladders. Moments later, as their Marine comrades provide covering fire at a near vertical trajectory, the first of the intrepid amphibious assaulters crests the top of the parapets and begin to lay down fire of their own as a vicious close-quarters fight unfolds atop the castle walls. In the midst of the vicious melee, Captain Silas Casey is grievously wounded, leaving Marine Corps Major Levi Twiggs in his place as commander. At the same time, a second party of American troops, under the command of Army Captain Samuel McKenzie and General Gideon Pello, advances up the eastern side of the hill atop which the castle lies. For roughly an hour, the battle unfolds as the American forces manage to breach the massive entrance gates and storm the entirety of the castle. Though they have fought ferociously against the divisions of Generals Worth, Quitman, and Pello at the base of the hill, the San Blas Battalion is nearly completely wiped out, with the survivors retreating further into the castle's interior. Atop the walls of the castle, the surviving Mexican troops from the San Blas Battalion, as well as the remaining young cadets, then fight on as they make a concerted strategic retreat to the castle's northeastern corner. The 5 remaining cadets, Agustin Melgar, Juan Escuchilla, Vicente Suarez, Francisco Marquez, and Fernando Montes de Oca, all between the ages of 13 and 20, fight on under the command of the young lieutenant from the National Military Academy, Lieutenant Juan de la Barrera. Finally, as all hope of victory is clearly lost, Cadet Juan Escuchilla, in a final act of defiance, wraps himself in the Mexican flag and leaps from the high stone walls to his death, rather than be captured by the American forces. By 9 a.m., the battle for Chapultepec Castle is over, as General Bravo officially surrenders to the U.S. Army's New York Regiment, and the U.S. Marines hoist the first American flag over the walls of the castle. Though the battle is over, the repercussions of the Battle of Chapultepec have only just begun. They will both be harsh and immediate. At the American field headquarters, a group of 30 Irish immigrants will be among the first to suffer the ramifications of Mexico's defeat. They are known as the San Patricios, or the St. Patrick's Battalion, recent immigrants who had defected from the U.S. Army after suffering the rampant anti-Catholic treatment of their Protestant officers. They had instead chosen to cross the Rio Grande and join forces with their Papist brothers in General Santa Anna's army. Here, they had fought valiantly in several engagements, gaining the enduring admiration of their Mexican comrades in arms. However, they had finally been overrun at the Battle of Churubusco on August 20th, just weeks earlier. Now, under the orders of William S. Harney, they are to be executed by hanging. As a particularly pointed caveat to these orders, Harney has insisted that the men be lined up and made to wait for their demise until the moment the American flag is raised over the walls of Chapultepec in victory. As the flag of the victorious American forces is raised, the lives of the unfortunate San Patricios are snuffed out en masse at the end of 30 rawhide ropes. This action, combined with the execution of 16 more men on September 10th at San Angel and 4 more on September 11th at the village of Mixcoac, is the largest mass execution in the history of the United States. While more than 9,000 American troops deserted during the war, only the San Patricios would face such harsh punishment at the hands of the U.S. Army officers. Back at the castle, General Scott arrives to the cheers of the American forces, and arrangements are quickly made for the Americans to now continue their attack towards Mexico City. By early afternoon, the Army's 15th Infantry has been left to stand guard over the castle, as General Quitman leads the remaining soldiers and Marines as they make their way towards the 2 critical remaining points of ingress into the capital city. The Belen Gate is defended by the Morelia Battalion, commanded by General Andreas Terres. They are composed of 3 cannons and 180 men. However, with their ammunition supplies already dwindling and now rapidly diminishing, Terres and his men quickly draw back to Mexico City, leaving the American soldiers and Marines with now unfettered access to General Santa Anna's last remaining stronghold. Here, with victory in sight, the American forces will face perhaps their greatest challenge yet in the Mexican-American War. Though they have made relatively quick and brutally decisive work out of taking Chapultepec Castle, the fight that will unfold next will be among the most costly in American military history. Though they have comported themselves with distinction on this day, giving birth to the Marine Corps hymn's famous line, "From the Halls of Montezuma," the Marines in particular will face horrendous losses in the battle to come. Major Levi Twiggs, hero of this seminal engagement in the Corps' history, will fall just days later on September 15th, alongside 29 other Marines, leaving their casualty rate for the Battle of Mexico City at over 90%, and forever cementing the Marines' reputation as a small but tenacious and uniquely valuable fighting force in the American military arsenal. For General Santa Anna, this is truly the beginning of the end, as the fall of Mexico City, as he well knows, will result in Mexico's ultimate defeat in the war. But the stories of heroism, sacrifice, and suffering on both sides of the Battle of Mexico City, as well as the highly consequential and highly controversial ending to the war, are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us. If you liked this story, click on one of the videos on your screen now to hear more. We'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.